Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
What's up, guys? Darren here. Welcome to the show, and I'm coming at you this week from Southern California on a beautiful, beautiful April day. I hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world. It's hard to believe, but we now have listeners from over 90 countries tuning in to this show, and I am doing it all for you guys. So if you have questions about schools or the application process, feel free to drop me an email at darren@touchmba.com. That's DARREN at touchmba.com. I'd love to help you out, maybe even on the air. So this week I had Jessica Chung from the UCLA Anderson School on the show, and gosh, we had a really great conversation about the culture at UCLA and what she's looking for from applicants. I think you'll get a ton of value from this one, and she really shares a lot of great tips. So if you're looking to apply to a top school on the West Coast of the US, you definitely have to consider UCLA Anderson and listen to this entire episode all the way through. You're going to find a lot of great tips. Here at Touch MBA, we're all about helping you figure out which program fits you best. So if you want to get some free feedback on your profile, some free school recommendations, head over to touchmba.com and we'd be glad to help you over there. We also have an online course and community for those of you who don't want to apply in a vacuum and want to get an outside perspective on your application and your profile and what schools you're interested in. We have a lot of applicants who are now soon going to be students at the top MBA programs around the world, so they'd be happy to help out as well. You can check that out at touchmba.com/course. All right, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Let's get to it. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our next guest to the show. Jessica Chung is the Associate Director of MBA Admissions for the UCLA Anderson School of Management. Jessica grew up in Southern California. She got her bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley, but then her master's in education from UCLA. So she's very familiar with the school, and she also worked for USC Marshall School as a graduate admissions advisor before joining the Anderson School in 2007. So it's been almost 8 years that Jessica has been helping out with, MBA admissions at Anderson. And I just can't wait to learn more about the program. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren, for having me.
Jessica, if we could get straight to the heart of it, the first question I like to ask is, what makes the Anderson MBA unique from other top-ranked business schools?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me personally, I feel like what really makes UCLA Anderson unique are three things. Number one, our location. I think it's really unbeatable being in Los Angeles, not just because of the great weather or the beach close by, but just being in such a diverse city and also being surrounded by so many different kinds of businesses and industries during your time in business school. I think that's a really unique opportunity, as well as just the community of Southern California and Los Angeles being very eclectic and diverse as well. The culture that we have at Anderson is also something that we're really proud of. It's a place where I'll talk about a little more detail later, but it's very collaborative, it's very supportive. We have this idea amongst our students and just the school as a whole about sharing success and taking a lot of joy in seeing each other succeed just as much as seeing yourself succeed as an individual. And then I also finally, I think just the ability to have an opportunity to tailor or customize your academics to an extent, given everyone's unique career and professional goals during their time in business school and beyond, to be able to customize some of the offerings that we have here on campus, I think is also helpful to have during your time in business school and will just help you later on as you progress in your career afterwards.
So could you share some examples of how students can customize their Anderson MBA?
Sure. So we, a couple of years ago, revamped our curriculum so that we instituted these, what are called tracks and specializations. Basically, you can look at them similar to majors and minors in undergraduate studies. So we have 4 different tracks and 13 different specializations. The tracks are kind of created to help students optimize their academic experience while they're here, to gain better direction and focus and prepare for recruiting opportunities, because they happen so quickly, even pretty much from the time you start business school. So our options with the tracks are consulting, marketing, finance, and a customized track for those that don't technically fit or necessarily fit within those buckets. And they're flexible, so you can change direction in your second year. You're not going to be tied to a particular track if that's something you come in interested in, and maybe change your mind as you're going through school. They're optional, like I mentioned, but the majority of our students select them because it helps to just better prepare themselves for their career later on. It just, again, gives you more structure in your academics, so you know you're taking the classes that are going to best benefit you. The specializations, somewhat like the minors or concentrations, are a bit more focused, and they allow students to really customize your preparation even further. So you're getting more depth of expertise in specific industries or functions that you intend to pursue after school. So we have 13 specializations. Realistically speaking, most students can opt to do 1 track and 2 specializations, given the parameters of the 2 years in the program and the unit requirements to graduate. And that's what most students will opt to do if they decide to pursue the tracks and specializations. And again, it's optional. So let's say you want to do something that's very broad. You want to get a very general management degree program, and you want to have a lot more flexibility in choosing the electives you think are best suited for you, or you want to do something that's very niche or maybe non-traditional, then again, you can choose and pick and choose the electives and the classes that you think are going to be most beneficial.
So let's talk about that student culture. I saw on your website, your associate dean, Robert Weller, said you're looking for people who will fit with our culture and want to be challenged by our vision for the future. So could you expand a bit more on that unique Anderson culture?
There are 3 defining principles that we feel really describe the Anderson culture. And number 1 is what I mentioned, which was that idea of sharing success. And I think to me, that's probably the most important part, the part that I think really resonates, not just with myself, but with other students and prospective students. And it is really that idea of not just being satisfied with seeing yourself succeed personally or professionally. And, it's a place here where it is competitive because you're with other very smart and ambitious students that have very high goals and ambitious goals, but you're not going to try to achieve your goals at the expense of other folks, other classmates. You're not going to step on other people to get to the top. It's not that type of a culture that we have here. I think everyone wants to ensure that everyone, you're bringing your A game, you're doing your best, you're challenging one another, but at the same time, you're still encouraging one another to do as best as you can. And I think you can see a lot of these examples when you talk with our students and our alums. Or if you even come and visit a class, you can see that in action in the classroom. An example of this idea of sharing success is it comes into play a lot of times in recruiting. You'll see students vying for the same internship, which will only have a limited number of slots, maybe just 1. But rather than having students kind of hide or hold close to their vest things that might give them the advantage or the upper hand in the recruiting process, they'll be very collaborative and share tips, share strategies for success or advice, things to watch out for in the interview process, whatever the case might be. So it's, everyone wants to have an even playing field. You're not just going to try to hold these cards to your advantage so that you have that advantage over your fellow classmates. And I think that's just one example of the way that students want to share success. Again, everyone's vested in wanting to see one another do well, not just themselves.
I've heard similar things from my friends. And in terms of that second value, which is we think fearlessly, because I know that in your essay, you talk about these 3 defining principles, and then you ask applicants to discuss them and how they relate to their values. What exactly do you mean by we think fearlessly?
I think just not really being boxed into certain ways of thinking. If you have a problem and there is a very set solution that most people have already kind of come to, it's not like you're going to just be automatically just applying that solution to an issue. People are going to think creatively and just, experiment, not be afraid to experiment, not be afraid to come up with non-traditional types of conclusions when it comes to speaking or coming to, or just tackling a difficult business problem. And that can apply whether, students want to go into entrepreneurship or something that is, more non-traditional or even in an established or traditional industry. So you can look to our faculty for some examples. I know like Professor Bhagwan Chaudhry, he's pretty well known for his idea of financial access at birth, the FAB plan, where he proposes creating a savings account for every child or infant that's born in the world, and how that applies to ensuring that they have some level of success in the future or some sort of savings that they can utilize in the future. These are the types of thinking that our professors not just write research papers about, but also bring these ideas into the classroom as well. And then students continue to bring in their own creative ideas and thoughts. And it's a safe place to be able to do so. There's, people will, look for holes or will challenge your ideas, but then I don't think it's a place where people aren't going to be afraid by that. They're not going to be afraid to express their thoughts. And so we really encourage our students to think fearlessly in that way, and to just find new ways to look at established markets. You might look at social media or marketing in a different way. You might look at manufacturing a different way. You don't have to be boxed in by these traditional ways of thinking.
That's related to my next question, which is academically, where do you think Anderson really stands out?
Well, academically, as I mentioned, we had those tracks and specializations. I think that is something that is somewhat unique to Anderson, that you have that option. And again, it's an option, which I think is nice because it just gives you more flexibility. I think another area that's in which we stand out is the fact that we are also connected to UCLA as a whole, one of the most well-regarded public research institutions in the world. And we have so many other graduate programs that are amazing here. As a business student at UCLA Anderson, you're not disallowed from being able to take advantage of those other resources. So our students have an opportunity to take up to 3 graduate courses in other programs or other graduate programs at UCLA and have them count towards their MBA. So the nice thing about that is that it further opens up additional electives or opportunities, classes in terms of fulfilling the degree requirements for the program, but also just getting to know students from other programs as well. So for example, we have a lot of students interested in taking some classes over in the School of Television, Film, and Theater. There are some electives there that our students have an opportunity to take and have them count towards their MBA. And for those especially interested in entertainment, it just gives another perspective on the industry, not just strictly from a management perspective, but perhaps from the more creative perspective, and opens up that channel of being able to communicate and network with students that are not just, kind of within the traditional MBA program itself.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. So up to 3 classes. Can you tell us a bit where Anderson wants to go in the future and how you perhaps seeing the program evolve in the next couple of years?
Well, I think one area is in just continuing to provide our students with global perspectives and really bring Anderson to the next level in terms of that type of global awareness.
Yeah.
And I know the dean, that's a big push for her as well. She definitely does a lot of networking and continuing to establish strong relationships, so building relationships with alumni and companies around the world. And for our students, that also translates into opportunities for them to get that type of global perspective during their time in the program. So one of the really kind of exciting things that our students are now being more involved are in these global immersion programs during school, where they will go with their classmates and faculty and administrators abroad to another country for about 10 days, a week to 10 days, to really immerse themselves in the culture of another country, understand the business culture, do lots of company visits, and just have that time to really immerse yourself within that country within a more condensed time frame. So you're not taking away from your overall business school experience, but you're adding to that and enhancing that by being able to go on these types of immersive trips. And these classes are not just with full-time MBA students. A lot of times these classes also include students from our fully employed or FEMBA program and our executive MBA program too. So another great way to get to know your MBA colleagues and classmates from the other programs that you might not be able to connect with so much in the classroom in other ways.
One interesting development I've seen in LA is a lot of tech companies coming down to LA, and of course they're calling it Silicon Beach now. And I noticed that you guys had a partnership with Google.
Yeah, the partnership with Google, it's actually a digital marketing course that was just an elective that we offered starting this year. And so it's really just bringing in kind of ideas and maybe guest speakers and other folks into the classroom. They're doing cutting edge things within digital marketing. And so this is the first year. I think this fall was the first time we've offered that course. So I don't have too much details on the class itself, but it's definitely something that, those are the kinds of partnerships that we want to continue to forge and bring in for our students to take advantage of, bringing in real world applicable situations and issues for a variety of students to be able to learn about. You don't necessarily have to be focused only on marketing to really get a lot of information or different perspective out of that class. And so I know that we're working hard to continue to try to bring in those kinds of partnerships in the future.
Got it. You mentioned Los Angeles as the number one reason to think about UCLA. So why should candidates get their MBA in LA versus the other big cities in the US?
Yeah. So I'm kind of biased because I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to school up in the Bay Area, which I loved, but I ended up back in LA and I can't really imagine myself living elsewhere. So touch of bias. But, in terms of getting your MBA, I think just being in Los Angeles and Southern California, there's just a lot going on here. Being right in between the Pacific Rim and Latin American countries and having that first row perspective of all the happenings that are going on. And we do have pretty good connections with our alumni and companies and such within those two regions. I think that's also really a big benefit of being in the West Coast. Of course, like you mentioned, Silicon Beach. Personally, I feel like it's a really interesting time to be in LA because of the development of Silicon Beach. It's still kind of in its incubating or development stages. Is growing. And, this type of, I don't think that this time is ever going to come back, or, you know what I mean? It's a very finite period of time when this whole phenomenon of Silicon Beach is growing. It's not as established as Silicon Valley, but there are so many really exciting and innovative companies that are here that I want to have a presence here. And even larger companies like Facebook and Google and such are building these campuses here down in Southern California. So I think it's just a really great time to be here while this community is growing and seeing that community evolve. It's just really exciting to me. And I think you can get a lot out of that. These companies and the area is only just a few miles from campus. And I know that our students they want to be really active in pursuing either opportunities or just learning about the different companies that are here. So I think that's a really great advantage. And like I mentioned, just being in Los Angeles, it's a place where it's considered the 15th largest economy in the world, just our city or this region or this area. The diverse community we have dozens of languages that are spoken here, so many different ethnic enclaves, lots of really great food. If you're a foodie, there's so many different neighborhoods and cuisines to explore, which I think is really fun. The lifestyle, it's a place where I think, you're really going to be working hard, definitely. Business school, no matter where you are, is going to be very rigorous. But I think it's great to go to school in a place where you're going to be in sunshine and, having really great weather and the beach and outdoor activities and places to explore during your 2 years here. And I think finally, the great thing about LA is that you're not tied to staying in Los Angeles. And again, you have that perspective of a lot of different industries and companies right within our doorstep or very close by. And I think a lot of our students end up wanting to stay in the West Coast or in Southern California or whatnot because of the opportunities that are available and because they enjoy the lifestyle that they can have here. But if not, you're definitely not tied to staying in the West Coast. I don't think we're considered a regional school where, all your opportunities are just going to pretty much be within the boundaries of California or whatever the case might be. A lot of our students will go back to the East Coast or go abroad or go to other parts of the country around the world for jobs. And so, you're taking that network, which is strong here in Southern California and the West Coast, but I think pretty much every major city you can think of, you'll be able to find Anderson alumni who still have that collaborative mindset that are always willing to help as much as they can, providing guidance or advice or, whatever the case might be for our students.
Fantastic. So I think, that we've covered a lot about the program and what makes it unique. Let's talk about the admissions process. So I'm sure all our listeners' ears will perk up. This is part of the program they really want to know more about. So my first question here is, what are the fit qualities you're looking for from applicants?
It's a good question, and it's kind of hard to, I think, answer because we can go on and on about this for a very long time. But I was trying to think about really what are the main qualities that we look for in our applicants. When I'm reading an application or evaluating one of the things I look at is readiness. And readiness, it's unique for everybody. It could be for some folks who are ready right out of undergrad. For some folks, it could be 2 years out, 5 years out, 6 years out, whatever the case might be. But to really make that case for why this point in your life, at this point in your career, this is the best time to pursue an MBA. And I think a lot of that involves just doing your research, talking to people, self-reflection, things like that. And to make that case, why is this the time to go? What do you want to get out of the program? And also, what can you contribute to your potential classmates based on your experiences professionally and personally and all these other factors? And then for Anderson, for our students at UCLA Anderson, students are really involved both inside and outside the classroom. So I want to see that you're going to be able to continue that tradition of giving back to your classmates and to the community here within Anderson, UCLA, LA, whatever as a whole. And so we want to see that you're not just going to be someone who's going to go to class and not be engaged. You're going to be involved in clubs and activities. You're going to be in leadership roles. You're going to be active within volunteering. It is a very student-led community that we have here. So a lot of initiatives that have happened really started from an idea that students might have had. And this also goes back to this idea of driving change that we have as part of our culture. It's great to have an idea, and I think we all have ideas, but if you're not going to be able to execute or run with it, then it's really not going to get anywhere. But our students, I think, they are the types that if they see they want to change something or try something new, they won't be afraid to voice it, and they'll also try to find ways to be able to make that happen. And so we want to see that prospective applicants are going to have that type of fire to get things done or try new things and really get involved in the community. And then again, just going back to the idea of sharing success, it's not just about you. Of course, you're going back to school and getting an MBA to improve yourself and to open up new opportunities. But also here at UCLA Anderson, we want to also make sure that you're going to be able to contribute to the class, both as a student and as an alum, and you're really going to be able to make that case again in the application process.
Those are great tips. Thank you for sharing those. Now, the second one I'm particularly interested in, which is you're looking for students who will be engaged, who will be involved, and who will be willing to, get their feet dirty, so to speak. How can applicants show that through your essay or through their application? Because I think that it's easy for someone to say, okay, I want to help with the Latin American Business Club, or, I want to be a part of this entrepreneurship club or conference. But would you have any other tips there on how they can really make that case, without just saying it?
Well, I would look at your level of involvement in different clubs and activities during your time in school and then beyond. And it's all taken in context. There are some people who are going to have really, really busy careers, investment bankers. If you're working 100-hour weeks and you're not going to have much time to participate in extracurricular activities. I get it. And we take that into consideration. But showing that, when you do have the time to give back, that you're really making the most of use of your time. Like, if you're really busy at work, maybe you can get involved within the workplace in things outside of just your role in the office. And if you do have that time outside of work, then that you are involved. And it doesn't have to be in 10 million different activities. It could be just a few, but then you're really deeply involved. You've grown with the organization. You've really made an impact on those different organizations. Those are the types of things that we're looking for. And showing that you genuinely want to, you're genuine in your involvement within these organizations. Like, for example, we have students who are really involved in recruiting at their companies, which is great because maybe that'll translate into them wanting to be involved in admissions here. You can tell just by the way that students speak about their level of involvement. It's just not a surface level, I'm just part of this, committee as a member. You've shown that you're actively involved by having done X, Y, and Z, and you've impacted recruiting by maybe more students getting interviews from your undergrad institution or whatever the case might be, but showing that you're genuinely, truly are vested in being involved in these different ways. So I think that's one way. And another way is a lot of times, applicants will talk specifically about different clubs and organizations at UCLA Anderson, which is great because it shows you've done your research. But I think going beyond just the surface level knowledge of that an organization exists and showing that you've done more in-depth research by talking to people within the organization, or just learning more about the different activities that these clubs might put together or organize beyond just that surface level, like a blurb on a website. Those are the ways then I can tell, okay, you're genuinely interested in these different clubs. Then I can see you also, if you're a student here, being an active participant or in a leadership role to help to manage or put together these types of organizations and events in the future. So I think that type of in-depth research, and also just that history, like I mentioned, of your involvement in other activities are ways that we're able to glean that information.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that was such a good answer. I have to ask you about the first point then too as well, which is readiness. Making sure that applicants make the case for why now, why this is the right time in their careers to get an MBA. And that could be different, depending on people's level of experience. So can I ask, is this about making a very clear case for what you want to do after you get your MBA? Do you expect applicants to have very concrete sort of options or ideas of the types of jobs they're looking for? Or are you looking for something else when you mean, this readiness?
Yeah, and by readiness, it could be, like you mentioned, a lot of factors. Readiness in terms of where you are in your career now, but it also is very much tied to what you want to do after the MBA as well. So the more clarity you have in your goals, the more focused you are, the more convincing your argument will be for readiness at this point. Especially, and it depends, there are some folks who want to switch careers and use MBA to help pivot you to do something different from what you're doing now, which is fine, which is what the majority of our students do that are here at UCLA Anderson. But we want to see that that's a realistic goal, that an MBA is really going to help bridge that gap from where you are now to what you want to do afterwards. Especially for those that do want to switch careers, have you talked to people? Have you done your research on the industry? What are the chances? What are the realistic types of job offers that you can get given your background and given what you can get through business school, and then, what you want to do afterwards? For those that want to be career enhancers, so you want to stay within your industry or function, but you want to get yourself to the next level within management or in a leadership role, that's a wonderful reason to get an MBA as well. And so what do you think, what is that bridge? What are you using the MBA for in that sense? Where are you at this point in your career where you've hit kind of a plateau? And what are the skill sets? What is the professional development you want to get in an MBA that's going to help you to get to that next level? And what is it that you want to do? Do you want to move into a management role, but what specifically is that? So I think the more specific you can be, the better. And when it comes to being very general or vague or abstract, that's could be a red flag for us, because it can indicate to us that you're not quite sure what it is you want to do. Yeah. And that's not to say that you can't change your mind or change your career plans once you're in school, but it's definitely going to make it more difficult for you to focus in and go through recruiting and pick the classes you think are going to be best suited for your plans, because business school goes so quickly. It's 2 years. You're doing recruiting activities in a lot of schools pretty early on in that first year, as early as your first quarter or semester. So the more prepared, the more focused you are early on, the more you'll be able to just take advantage and get the most out of your time in school.
Can you walk us through the life of an application so our listeners know, what happens to their applications?
Okay, so for us at UCLA Anderson, for the full-time MBA program admissions process, we have 3 rounds. We look at all of our applications pretty much after the round deadline has passed, so we can see cohesively what the entire applicant pool looks like for that group, and then make better informed admissions evaluations and decisions. So first off, once we get our applications, they are released to the committee, admissions committee, admissions officers like myself and other folks to evaluate for our first read. So we'll do a first very thorough evaluation of the application, and it's holistic and they're all read from cover to cover. So everything is taken into consideration. Once it's gone through that first thorough evaluation or read, we'll make that the first decision point is whether or not we'd like to invite a candidate for an admissions interview. For our interviews are all by invitation only, and they can be done either via Skype or in person on campus. And they're either platform, it's equally looked upon. There's no preference given to one or the other. So once we invite a candidate for an interview, candidate completes the interview, We read the file again for another evaluation after with a post-interview report.
Yes.
And then we come to a final decision. So that's kind of it, very simply from A to B to C. But in between there could be other reads. Like if there's a candidate we're just not quite sure of, it can go to another person for another perspective. That could happen with the first read. It can happen after the interview. It can happen multiple times after the interview. So a file will get read at least twice, if usually more than that.
Yeah.
And then once we get to a final decision, that decision can be either admit, not admitted, or waitlist. For those folks who are waitlisted, you would also have an opportunity after you're notified to send in additional information to enhance your candidacy. And I have a blog post on our admissions blog about all the different items that you can submit. And then we would give you an update on your application decision by the next round. And then up to that point, we'll give you periodic updates and just keep in touch to see if you're still interested in staying on the wait list and still interested in Anderson, things like that. But that's pretty much the life cycle of an applicant. Throughout that time, there's always, if you have any questions, you're always welcome to email or call us in the admissions office. We'd be happy to help.
And you would encourage applicants to apply in the earlier rounds, correct?
Yeah, actually, what I usually advise is apply when your application will be strongest. So I think some people have this misconception, if I apply earlier, then my chances of getting admitted are higher. Right. And that's not necessarily the case. I think if your application is not that strong and you apply early, it's still not going to be strong. So what I think is best is to think about how much time you need to prepare your application and then kind of see which round deadline best meets that time frame. So for example, let's say you've done all your research pretty early on, you've taken the GMAT or GRE, you've done pretty much completed the major components of the application, and you can apply by round one, go for it, because then you'll get your decision earlier and, you have more time to plan ahead. If you need more time, round two is a better time frame, then that's great. Round two is a great time to apply as well. Between rounds 1 and 2, I think in terms of the selectivity, it's about the same. I think just because we have plenty of seat spots in the class at that point, the time where I would say would get a little bit more challenging would be round 3, just because by that point we have admitted a pretty good group of admits from the previous rounds. And so we have to keep in mind that the space constraint by that point. That's not to say we haven't admitted anyone from round 3. Since I've been here, we've always admitted strong candidates out of round 3, but we do have to keep that consideration, the space consideration in mind. So your profile might have to just be that much stronger, perhaps, to really stand out.
Could we talk about your interview? Because that seems to be an important part of the process. So Jessica, who conducts the interviews? Is it the admissions office or students?
Sure. So the interviews are conducted primarily by our second-year student interviewers who we train to conduct our admissions interviews. The process itself is managed by the admissions office, and the invitations will go out from our office, and they can be conducted either in person or via Skype. And of course, either platform is fine. It's just whatever's most convenient for the interviewee. I think the great thing about having our students conduct the interviews is that during the interview, you're able to get another level of understanding of Anderson and our culture and get more of your questions about the program addressed during your conversation with your student interviewee or interviewer. Aside from our student interviewers, sometimes the admissions officers will conduct some of the interviews too, depending usually on the capacity of our students or if they're not here because of breaks like winter break or spring break and such.
Your student interviewers will have the CV of the applicant. How much will they know about the applicant?
So we will give them the resumes prior to the interview itself. And then just basic information like, your name and your email address and where you're located and Skype ID if you're connecting through Skype. But primarily it is a blind interview aside from that, because we don't want our students to come in with any kind of prejudgments or anything prior to the interview itself. So it's pretty much just that basic information and then the resume.
Would you have any tips for our listeners in terms of how they can best prepare or express themselves in those interviews?
Sure. I think number one is to prepare, of course. But I would say think about this kind of like a job interview. So you want to be prepared. You want to know your story. You want to know your resume. You want to know the points about yourself and your work experience that you really want the interviewer to know about you. And you want to sell yourself. You want to say, why am I going to be a good fit here at Anderson? What do I know about the program? How am I going to take advantage of the resources as a student? And also, how can I be a great addition to your community? What can I give back? What are some unique unique qualities about myself that I think would be a really great fit that other students and potential classmates and the alumni network can benefit from. So I think just doing that type of preparation. But I think you have to be cautious also not to sound over rehearsed, because that's another thing. If you kind of come across as canned and robotic, then you're not going to be able to connect with your interviewer. And it's just kind of going to lose that connection and that person's, not to say interest, but it's just going to be hard to really kind of connect with that person on that deeper level. So be prepared, but don't just memorize answers to questions, I would say, or questions that you're anticipating. Be prepared for questions that might be completely off the grid, or just things that just might be very wacky. I mean, I don't think we necessarily do that so much, but I know some other schools might, but you just never know what kinds of questions you might be getting. So just make sure that you have a level of professionalism that you're not going to be fazed by those kinds of questions, because you might come into those situations when you're recruiting for jobs as well.
By those types of questions, do you mean like questions about news or industries, or just more like random personal type questions, or just
I think it can be both.
Okay.
It can be like, I think one time I asked somebody, if you were to be on the cover of a magazine, which one would you want to be on?
Oh, great question.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, it was just kind of a fun question, but I just wanted to kind of know their thought process as well, which I haven't used that question in a while, so maybe I will in the future.
Yeah.
But also, you might have an interviewer who is in an industry or recruiting for a job or came from an industry that you want to go into when you graduate.
Right.
So if you're talking about you're interested in pursuing X post MBA career, you never know, that person that you're talking with might have really deep institutional knowledge about that industry or a company or whatnot. They might probe you with more specific questions. So just be prepared if someone might ask you those types of questions. Not to say that you have to know everything about your intended career plans or whatever the case might be, but don't just have surface level responses. Just really kind of delve a little bit deeper in case your interviewer does as well.
Yes.
And then I would also say one last thing with the interviews is to come prepared with some meaningful questions to ask your interviewer. Because I know that, during the admissions process, you'll probably find a lot of information and gather a lot of info about the program that you're applying to. But there's so much more that you can learn from speaking with someone one-on-one. So come prepared with some types of meaningful questions to ask.
Those are some great tips. And do you have any last tips for our listeners on how they can improve their chances at UCLA Anderson?
So number one is research. And I probably said this multiple times in our conversation, but I really think that doing your research is important, especially for the schools that you're really most interested in attending. So, and when I say research, it doesn't mean just looking at their website and reading their admissions process or knowing what clubs that they have. It's, learning, going beyond just those blurbs, talking to people, I think is a really important part of the research process. Not just talking to admissions officers, especially if you have questions about the admissions process or application materials itself, but also, talk to students or alums that have similar career interests as you or similar clubs or activities that you would like to get involved in, because then you can really get a sense of, what are the ways that I can contribute or that I can really take advantage of these types of opportunities while I'm here? What are the different leadership opportunities in the Management Consulting Association, for example? What are the professional development opportunities that you have? Do you work with the Career Center? Those kinds of more meaningful questions, I think, are things that you're going to get a lot more out of during the research process when you talk to people. And I know that most schools have ways to contact student ambassadors or other folks to be able to get that type of insight when you're doing your research. And then the second part, I think, is also just to do some sort of self-reflection. And it goes back to that readiness component, I think. In your mind, you can be ready for an MBA, but if you're not able to articulate why to the admissions committee or to other people that are kind of part of the whole admissions process, then they might not be convinced that this is the right time for you or that this is the best fit for what you're looking for in business school. So think about that why now component. Think about all the things that you've accomplished up to this point. And then how are these experiences going to help your potential classmates? The perspective that you can bring. Maybe you have a lot of international work experience. How is that going to enhance the community and the learning community that a school has? So kind of thinking about that and, why now? What can you contribute? And how you're going to really be able to make that case in your application as well as in person if you're invited for the interview. And then finally, looking at the application as a balanced application. So one of the things that I know our applicants get really kind of anxious about are numbers, academics, and test scores. And I know that those are the things that are probably the most challenging within the admissions process. Knowing that you as an applicant are more than just a number, you're more than just your GPA, you're more than just your GMAT score. We really want to know more about other things you can contribute here. It is a holistic review, so your essay, your recommendation letter, your outside activities, all of those things are going to be just as important when we're reading an application. And so just make sure that you're not just too focused on making sure you get the highest GMAT score. Of course, a good GMAT score is going to be a positive data point, but don't neglect the other components just to make sure that, one part of the application looks perfect.
One last question on that letter of recommendation, because I noticed you guys only have one letter of recommendation required. So, what sort of tips do you have there in terms of who applicants should get for the recommenders?
So we do have only one letter of recommendation required. And so I think you just have to be very just really think hard about who you think is going to be the best advocate for you within that recommendation. The questions that we ask are not academic. They're not related to your academic abilities and such. So I would steer away from someone like a professor or a faculty member, unless you've done actual work alongside this person that can answer, so that person can answer the questions that we're asking. I think it would supplement what we see in your resume and in your essay. So it's almost like giving us more detail on things like your impact on the organization, your leadership management capabilities and potential, areas for improvement, and your interpersonal skills, your teamwork skills, communication skills, all those types of things. There are things that just enhance or just give us more information and clarity on your accomplishments in the workplace or in whatever other activity, outside activity, if your recommendation letter is coming from, let's say, like a community, service organization leader or something, or someone else. But it's really just tying together those pieces, showing that, yes, like for example, in your resume, you have shown career progression, you've taken on additional team leadership and personnel leadership roles. But what are some of the specifics in terms of what this person's accomplished from the perspective of a supervisor or a previous supervisor? What are ways that this person can improve, and how effective is this person within a team as a leader or as a member? So those are the types of things that we're looking for in that letter of recommendation.
If we can now talk about financing the program, could you let us know what percentage of your class get scholarships and what your average scholarship amounts are? And of course, the follow-up question, how can applicants improve their chances of winning funding?
Okay, so about last year, so for the class of 2016, about 62% of our admits received a fellowship award from the admissions office at the time that they're admitted. The award amount ranged, I would say it's probably better to give you a range. So because it depends on the strength of your overall application. The way we do fellowship decisions is also holistic. It's not just based strictly on numbers or whatever the case is. So the stronger your application compared to the rest of our admitted students, the more likely you'll get a fellowship and more likely the award amount will be higher. So it ranged anywhere last year, I want to say, from $20,000 each year up to full fellowship, full tuition and fees for each year. A lot of our students also took out loans, both domestic students as well as international students. We do have an international student loan program that doesn't require a U.S. cosigner, and a lot of the details are on our website under Financing Your MBA. And in terms of improving your chances for receiving a fellowship, I would say it just kind of aligns with the same idea of making sure your application is as strong as possible in all areas. I would say look at our class profile. Just because you kind of meet the averages or you look pretty similar to what the class profile looks like doesn't necessarily mean you're going to also be awarded a fellowship. I would say look at that as a baseline or as a benchmark, and then see how in what other areas you're even stronger. That could be your GMAT scores, your academics, it could be your work experience, it can be a lot of other factors or a combination of all those factors. So I think just making sure that every component of your application is as strong as possible, because just like in an admissions decision, the fellowship decision is also holistic.
Those fellowships are awarded along with the offer?
Yes, for the most part, fellowship recipients will be notified at the time that they also receive their admissions decision.
Do you have any other financing tips you'd like to share with our listeners?
Sure. So I spoke with our director of financial aid about this. I wanted to see what thoughts were. Number one thing is she said, talk to the financial aid office of the schools that you're interested in, because every school might have a slightly different policy or process, and it could be somewhat convoluted or not the clearest. So talking with the financial aid offices will just, I think, provide a bit more clarity, and everyone's situation could be unique or somewhat different. So contact them. Our financial aid office is very, very helpful, and they encourage prospective students to actually contact them now during the research or application process versus only kind of contacting them when they're admitted. Do it now. They're happy to talk to applicants at this point. A couple of things she said. Number one, if you're planning to borrow money, try to borrow later. Like during your 2 years in the MBA program, as opposed to borrowing right away, because you're going to be paying interest on whatever you're borrowing. Shop around, number two, for different rates. And so just look around. You don't have to take the first offer that's given to you. So just make sure that you're comparing it. You're looking around and seeing what options are out there for you if you're planning to borrow money. And then finally, she said, please check your credit report because you just never know. There might be something on your credit report that can impact your borrowing and your interest rates. And you don't want to be surprised when it comes time to borrow. So just try to look as early as you can. If there is something that needs to be fixed, then you can fix that prior to borrowing and having to take care of that at that point.
Thank you for those tips. In fact, I don't think we've heard those before on the podcast after 70 episodes. So thanks to your financial aid director for all those tips. If we can talk about careers now, what makes Anderson special from a career perspective? Obviously this is a huge concern for our listeners. They want to land great jobs after their MBAs.
So with our career center called the Parker Career Management Center, or Parker CMC, and they are the dedicated career center. One of the great things about the Parker CMC is that they provide really individualized attention to our students. So they do thousands and thousands of one-on-one advising sessions, which I think is amazing. And they can be formal advising sessions where you make an appointment, or they could be informal ones where you might run into an advisor in the hallway, and then you might just ask for some quick career advice or ask them a question, and they're happy to help you at that point. It's not like you just have to make an appointment and that's the only time you come. They try to be as accessible as possible, which I think is great. And also, I think the level of student involvement and the collaboration with our students is also a unique part of our Parker CMC resources. One of the programs that we're known for is called ACT, which stands for Anderson Career Teams. And ACT is a program that was pioneered here at Anderson several years back, which is like a mentorship program between first and second year students. So we have different ACT groups that are based on industries and functional interests. And we have second year student coaches who basically guide the first year students within these different ACT teams on the summer internship recruiting process, tailoring your resume to make sure it stands out, just being like a coach and a mentor for students as they're going through the summer internship search. And I think it's a great way to collaborate with these second year students. They've gone through the process, they've been successful, they just completed an internship within that particular industry or function. They can provide very specific tips and advice to students to help them maximize their success as well. So it's a really great program. The vast majority of our students who participate in the ACT teams will highly recommend them to other students. We have some even second year ACT teams for those that are students that are also still looking for opportunities during that second year as well. So, and again, another great way to just share knowledge and be able to collaborate within the student community too. And there is actually an interesting data point here where we have that one-on-one career advising. The average student has 7.6 sessions with their industry-specific career counselor. So you're not just meeting with your career counselor advisor once, it's several times during your time here at Anderson. So it just speaks to that level of that individualized attention, which I think is great. Our career services were rated A+ by our students within the Bloomberg Business Week survey. 100% of the students who were looking for an internship last year got an internship. And I think those results are due to just the robust services and that level of attention that our Parker CMC provides our students.
Let me tell you that getting any good grade from your career service department in an MBA program is really, really tough. So that's a really amazing accomplishment to get an A+ rating, because it's a tough job, career services, and helping MBA students find their dream or target job. So that's really amazing. What trends are you seeing in student recruiting from UCLA the past couple of years?
So I think one of the great things about Anderson is the diversity of post-MBA career plans. So there's no one industry that the vast majority of our students will go into after graduating. But some interesting trends over the last few years. We are very strong in finance and consulting. And so those are still amongst the top industries that our students will pursue and get jobs in after graduating. In the last few years, technology has overtaken finance and consulting as the number one area that students will go into after graduation. And I think there's a lot of different factors, a lot of opportunities, definitely within the high-tech field, the connections that we have and the resources that we have for students interested in technology as well is another reason I think behind that. So tech, finance, and consulting are pretty much like are the top 3 industries students pursue. But there are a lot of other non-traditional or niche kind of areas that students will also pursue as well, like energy, real estate, healthcare, CPGs, media, entertainment. All of those areas are also have a lot of interest amongst our students too.
Yeah, I noticed it was pretty balanced based on your last career placement report between industries and functions. And I noticed some of your top recruiters were some big names: Deloitte, Google, PwC, Amazon, Disney, Microsoft. Yep. So yeah, it kind of gives you a flavor of what's going on. And what is the best way for applicants to have those in-depth conversations with students and alumni? Because I think a clear message from our conversation has been how important it is to research and really have a good idea of what's going on, on the ground floor, so to speak, at the school.
So we want to try to make it easy for prospective students to contact current students to get a better perspective of the program. And so we have our team of admissions or students involved in the admissions procedures called AAC, or Admissions Ambassador Corps. And they are students that basically are here to help with our class visit program, to help with conducting our group info sessions, campus tours, our student interviews, all those kinds of things. And we also have a AAC portal on our website. And on this portal, you can fill out your information, your name, your email address, areas of industry interests, and things like that. And then we will send your request to a current student for them to get back to you. Great. So that's a great way just to directly get in touch with the current student via email, start that conversation. Of our different student clubs, we have admissions liaisons or kind of VPs of admissions that are also there to help with our admissions initiatives and to get in touch with prospective students and have your questions answered. And even if there are questions they can't answer individually, they always know other students or classmates that they can refer you to help you to get those connections and the conversation started.
Great. So I'll be sure to link to that page that you just mentioned. Is there anything else about the UCLA Anderson MBA that you just wish more candidates knew about when you're giving presentations around the US and the world, or any common misconception about the program that you would like to clarify?
I think number one, especially I think for those that are not from the West Coast, I think there's this concern that if I go to school in California, I won't have any options to leave. I'm going to basically be not stuck, but I'm going to have to stay in this area. So I think that's a misconception that's not true at all. We have students, like I mentioned, doing internships and getting jobs all around the country and all around the world. So the UCLA Anderson name, the brand, the connections that we have associated with the school are going to carry you far regardless of where it is that you want to go. For some reasons, I think sometimes when people think of LA, they just think of entertainment and they think, oh, UCLA equals entertainment, and if I don't want to do entertainment, it's not the best place to be. But entertainment is one of those niche areas that students pursue, and like I mentioned, the majority of our students will go into finance or consulting or technology and in other smaller niche or non-traditional places as well. So you can come here and you'll definitely get a very robust education academically, as well as building your contacts and your network in a variety of other areas. And I think finally, just in terms of the academics, it is a pretty rigorous curriculum we have here that, especially in the first year, it's analytical, it's pretty challenging. So I think, coming in knowing that the academics are not going to just be very fluffy. It's going to be very rigorous that first year. But then we have a lot of resources to help you to make sure that you're going to be successful, through our student affairs office, through the Parker CMC, through the administration as a whole. We're really vested in wanting to see our students do well in the program and beyond. So there's a lot of resources that you can utilize. One of them are the academic centers. We have these really amazing 6 academic centers here at Anderson, aligned by industries or functions. So we have one for like the Price Center for Entrepreneurship. It's really, really well known, especially for those that are interested in entrepreneurship. A lot of resources. These academic centers actually work very closely with our student clubs to bring a lot of programming and other opportunities for students to take advantage of and utilize during their time in school. So I think having those building relationships with the centers and utilizing all of the resources that they have to offer to supplement what you're learning in the classroom and in different clubs and organizations is really going to just enhance your time in the program, and you'll get even that much more out of your time at UCLA Anderson.
Something you said just sparked this question, which is how important the analytical aspect is, especially in that first year when you're going through those core courses. For applicants who, say, have taken the GMAT a couple times and weren't able to quite get their score to the level they wanted, perhaps on the quantitative side of that, what would you recommend they do to show that they can get through those analytical core courses? I mean, would you recommend they just take the GMAT again, or are there other ways that they can show that they're strong in those areas?
Yeah, so we look at those academics, your academic potential, in a variety of different ways. We look at, primarily it'll be through your test scores. So GMAT, GRE, TOEFL for international students, or students educated outside the US, I should say, and your academic coursework, undergrad, and for those that might have graduate level coursework or beyond, all that is taken into consideration. So, it's a balanced approach. If you, for example, like let's say you didn't do so well on your GMAT, but you did well in your undergrad academics, then that can help balance out a lower score, or vice versa. If you've taken the GMAT and you want to retake the test, you're welcome to do so, and we would look at the highest score for admissions purposes. We wouldn't just cherry pick the highest like verbal and quant from different time you've taken the test. It would just be the highest score overall that you've achieved, and we consider that. But we do, you do have that option to retake the test, and we're not going to average those scores or anything like that. And then also, if you would like to take classes at an extension program or at a community college or another institution, I would recommend something that's analytical, like calculus or statistics, to show that you have the academic aptitude, and then we feel comfortable with your potential to do well in the academics in our MBA program. So you can do a variety of those things, and people opt to do all. I would say think about like what is the best use of your time. Like, for example, if you were an engineering major in undergrad and you aced your calculus and statistics classes, it probably won't enhance your profile to take those classes again and get another A. It's just, all right, you got an A in those classes, and okay, you got an A again, but it's not really enhancing your application itself. It might be a better option maybe for those if you were like, you were a liberal arts major and you didn't take any quantitative courses in college, then maybe taking a calculus course can help to supplement your undergrad transcripts. We wouldn't factor that into your overall GPA, but it would just be another data point we could take into consideration when we're looking at and evaluating your academics.
That is so helpful. Jessica, thank you so much for your time. I feel like I've learned a lot about Anderson, and I'm sure our listeners will have too. So thanks again for your insights. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks again for having me.